a mouse click, and then an activation, and then have to make a decision, and then 3 milliseconds later, get a notification that says, oh, by the way, I'm switch class, I just did that. And front and center's like, oh, too late, I already activated I already pulled all the windows to the front. I didn't know you, like, it's a race condition. I have no idea when those things will time, but sometimes it doesn't.
Oh, goodness.
Right? And you can mess with the windows or whatever, like the window of time of like how long you're going to wait. But I don't want it to be slow. I don't want it to be like, I'm going to wait 3 seconds to see whether I should bring all the windows forward, because that's a terrible experience. Like, I want it to be fast. So I did the notifications, and it worked. Another solution, and this is where I had to get creative and or even more disgusting. But already this is, by the way, way too complicated, because now I have, and especially with race conditions, I'm using whatever my 12-core Mac Pro. I have no idea what the timings are like on Casey's crappy 12-inch MacBook. Like,
right.
Number of cores and what else is going on and how much release builds. So I'm making release builds or whatever. So my belt and suspenders approach was, yeah, do that. And when that works, great. But sometimes it's not going to work because you're going to lose the race and things are going to come in a different order. How do you handle that? So the way I handled that was, since these things are in the same app group and I have a shared container where they can both write files, and since one of the things that is the nature of switch class is that the switch class window doesn't move around or change size of every switch class switcher that's on, because it supports multiple displays. And I can write that to a file in the shared and always know the coordinates of the switch class things. So when a mouse click comes along, there's no more no, it doesn't know where the click happened, like in terms of what application or event. It does know the X and Y coordinates on each screen. And I can see, based on your coordinates of all the switch class app switcher frames, did that click's XY coordinates land in a switch class thing, in which case you should ignore it because switch class is the thing that made that app activate.
Wow.
That still doesn't cover 100% of the cases, because you can imagine a scenario where you very quickly quit an application and move the palette and click on it. Like, you could do some video game gymnastics to outrun this thing, right? Because it is writing a file to disk and it's being read. And by the way, you use a Darwin notification to tell it immediately to read the file, right?
Yeah, like the file has changed. Here's another, yeah.
But it does work, and I have not been able to induce any kind of buggy behavior in all of my testing with both of these approaches. Occasionally one will miss, but there's always the other one there underneath. And a surprising amount of the time, the synchronous one with the notification, like 90% of the time, that one works and wins and doesn't rely on this fallback. The fallback is just there for the scenarios where I lose the race, and then that one works. And then, of course, the complication is, but do you really want to be sending all these notifications and writing these stupid plist files? So I need them to not, both applications to not do this crap if the other one isn't there. If you just have switch class, I don't want any of this stuff running. If you just have front and center, I don't want any of this stuff running. Luckily, both of them are constantly watching applications be launched and quit, so they always know when their companion appears and when it disappears, right? They both do that already. So there's no polling, there's no, there are no spin locks, no loops, and both of them will just shut up and be quiet and be themselves when they're just there in isolation. But as soon as their companion appears, they'll start communicating and cooperating with their frames behind the scenes. And if one of them quits, they'll stop doing that, and they will stop listening and stop sending notifications. It's way too complicated for what looks like a stupid application switcher thing. But I have to say, it was one of the most fun things that I did in this development, because it is completely, not needless complexity, but like surprising complexity for what looks like a very simple application. Again, of my own making, because I made two of these stupid apps that both do weird things, and I made both of them have way too many options and be way too flexible instead of being like opinionated and saying it just should be classic mode everywhere. That would have avoided all this problem. But it was a fun programming challenge, and this was the most interesting the most interesting thing that didn't have to do with working around bugs. It was just me and my own bad decisions about my own applications that I had to solve a problem. And it was fun doing it. And it was fun, like, essentially doing server-like programming without any servers. Because, sending requests and responses and notifications and all that other stuff is a lot like server-side programming. But there's no servers running. There's no networking. It's all through the kernel. And it was pretty neat.
May I propose an alternate solution?
Sure.
Why don't you just build in the front and center functionality as an option in SightGlass?
I absolutely thought of that. That before I did the stupid frame thing, I'm like, I should just combine these two apps because then you don't have this problem. They're both the same application. There's no coordination things. They are literally the same app. I thought about it. Not everyone wants both these apps. I know there's not really a market for either one of them.
What I'm proposing is not that you combine the apps. What I'm proposing is that Sightglass becomes the both app.
Switchglass, not Sightglass.
Switchglass.
I know it's a bad name. I have had naming problems.
Sorry, I was thinking expensive coffee places.
Yeah. No, I didn't. Well, the first thing was some people don't want both, right? So if you make Switch hard enough to explain as it is, right? And it's like preferences UI and its settings are themselves weird and hard to explain. Switchglass is also surprisingly strange to explain and has a ton of options because that's the way I wanted it to, like, if listeners, this is the time when you should go to the show notes. Go and look at my website. Like, you don't have to buy the app. Just look at the website and look at the stupid preferences window for Switchglass and get an idea of exactly how far down the rabbit hole I went with customization. It's a little bit silly, but it's what I wanted to do, right? If I combine both these applications, just trying to find a way to communicate all of the functionality would have been incredibly hard, especially because this is a complication maybe we'll get to in another war story. Switchglass is configurable per monitor. So on each display, you can choose whether or not you want the palette to appear and every single setting about how, like, where it appears and everything, right? And so when you bring up the preferences, it brings up a window on every single monitor, kind of like display preferences. You know, when you go system preferences and you do displays, and it brings up a separate window on every display. That's how you configure displays separately. That's how this works. That's not how front and center works. Like, just dealing with the UI issues and the explanation of how this stuff works alone, it was just, it would have been a much bigger task. Like, at that point, I'm basically signing up to start making drag thing, and I'm not ready to sign up for that yet. So I'm going to make
give it another 2 weeks.
I'm going to make two purpose-built applications that do specific things. If you want one, or you want the other, or you want both, like, it'll work in all scenarios, but they're like single-purpose things. And within those single-purpose things, it's hard enough to explain and get working, right? But you're right, that is a technically better solution. And obviously, the real solution is, why don't you just make a new drag thing? Like, you're 2% of the way there already. Why not just do the other 98%? And I am thus far very capably resisting the urge to do that, because that is way more work than what I've been doing. And I just want these two little things, and I just want them to work together. So yes, that did occur to me and would be more straightforward technically, but I would still be working on that, and I would probably get to a point where I regretted it terribly, because just trying to figure out how to massage the preferences UI into something sensible would just be, and not from a technical perspective, but just like user interface design. How do I convey to the user how all these different things work? It's hard enough. Like, if you look at the Switchglass preferences, there's a section of it that applies globally, and there's another section that applies just to the display. And I try to label that and try to explain that, but even that, it's not a great interface. Like, it's a difficult problem. If you want to have per display settings, but also have global settings, but not have two different preferences things, you end up having to make like a quote unquote real preferences dialog with like the toolbar at the top and the different images. And it's complicated. So anyway, that's enough war stories for this week. I can revisit it in future weeks, because there are plenty more interesting and fun things about developing what looks like a very simple application. But just to give you an idea of the ridiculousness that's lurking under the covers of this thing that lets you click on an icon and bring an app to the front.
Awesome.
Oof. It's so true. I mean, I had the bare bones of PeekAView done really, really quickly, but it was trying